If your hips are tilted to the side like this, don't make this mistake if you're trying to correct it. So this is what's known as a lateral pelvic tilt, where one hip drops down on one side. And barring a leg length discrepancy or a flat foot on the lower side, generally speaking, what you're looking at in regards to a lateral pelvic tilt is the muscles below the hip on the low side are going to be really tight, and their muscles above the hip are going to be really tight as on the other side. And then inversely, you have weak muscles below the hip on the high side, weak muscles above the hip on the low side. So in this case, you have basically your adductors, your gluteus medius, your TFL, and your QL are all tight. And then again, the opposite muscles on the other side, gluteus medius, adductors, and QL are going to be weak from the high side. So you think, okay, well, if I just foam roll my the tight muscles, stretch them out, strengthen these other ones, then that will correct it, right? So you can just do foam roll, hip hikes to strengthen the glutes, and the QL is just doing like this, and that should address the problem. Well, the problem, that's where the people make the mistake, is that you're only addressing it from a standing still point, and humans move. If you look at the patterns that develop when it comes to a hip hike, you'll see that most of the time, not always, most of the time, the side that's higher is going to generally have a lot less internal rotation ability. And the reason why that is because when you walk, you need to be able to internally and externally rotate the hip. And if you're missing that internal rotation, which a lot of people are, but if it's especially a lot less compared to the other side, what happens is your body will have to compensate in order to get around that lack of mobility. That lack of mobility is what oftentimes is causing the hip hike. And so the imbalance of muscles that are in there are a major factor, but if you're not addressing the lack of mobility in the one side, every time you start walking, you're just going to reverse whatever work you're trying to do in order to get those hips to level out. So when it comes to increasing your end range of motion, it's important you want to make sure you're not just doing it passively. You want to make sure you're doing it actively. So in other words, you don't want to just be forcing your hip into a position if your muscles can't take it there on its own. Same like if somebody else is stretching out you. Not that there's anything wrong with that, that can help assist with it, but you want to be able to own that position by not just getting the hip or the whatever joint you're working on to that end range, but be able to hold that end range and ideally be able to push back from that same end range. It's called, the methodology for that is called pails and rails, and this is a good way of doing it, especially if your hips are really tight. So a good way because it's easy to be able to push back. So first thing you want to do is just check your range of motion. Say, so I'm laying my back without moving my femur. I can go out, say hypothetically 15 degrees or so. Then this specific one's really good for being able to push back. So if you were 15 degrees here, you don't all of a sudden want to see 70 degrees here. If you do, that means the hip's coming off the ground. So what you can do, just bring it down, find your end range of motion, stop right there, and now you have your leg to push against. So now you're going to push upwards for 20 seconds. Start off light, 10% of your maximum strength, and then gradually work your way up to 100% once you hit 20 seconds there. So once you hit 20 seconds, relax for a second, and then now push downwards again for another 20 seconds. You should feel a nice stretch right here on the front as you're pulling away from the external hip. Once you've done that for 20 seconds, repeat this again, pushing upwards, gradually building up for 20 seconds. So once you finish the pails and rails, ideally you want to immediately train. My favorite exercise for increasing internal hip rotation would be a modified kickstand RDL. So normal kickstand RDL looks like this. You're just coming straight down, hip hinging backwards. Modified version, you're going to shift the hip out to the side or past the knee and then keep it out there. And as you come down, you're going to internally rotate that belt buckle so the knee drops down and you do the scissor slide right here. So it looks like this from the side. Looks like that. Hope that helps. If you know anybody could benefit from this, just pass this along to them. And if you have any questions or thoughts, just write in the comments. Thanks.